Well, today we're looking at the last passage we're going to see, at least in this series of readings with David. Then we go into Solomon, because today we're going to be looking at the death of David and his instructions to Solomon. So this is a good transition that we're going to see here. And then we're going to talk about something completely different in the second half of the program, as we do normally. So what do we see here? Okay, David has lived his whole life. I don't have it in front of me. And what happens is I do this show, and as I do it, I have an idea of what I'm going to talk about. I have it pretty well. I've done a little research. I've done, I know what it is, what I'm going to say, and everything else. And then as I start doing the program, I start remembering, I should say this. I should say this. I should say this. So there is a total, I don't know what you'd call it, a whole ADD reality or ADHD where I'm going, this is where I plan to go, but that's not what's going to happen. So here we are looking, and therefore I'll remember a fact, and I'll say, I don't remember where the fact is. Maybe I have a couple details wrong there, but I have the general memory there. And that's what happened. So I think David may have lived until his 70s, I think. There you go. And so he's lived this whole life. Now, we've watched his whole life over the past week or so. We watched him from the time he was the shepherd boy chosen by Samuel to be the replacement for the king. And you realize that's not an easy position to be in, as we saw, because the king right away says, no one's replacing me but who I appoint. And that's it. And we've seen that in the Middle East a lot. But there comes that time where you see David's star rising, literally, and Saul getting jealous and upset. And this was after Saul makes his mistake where he disobeys the Lord and he takes the treasures from from the Amalekites. And the Lord said, you were not to do that. And he does. And that's where the Lord says, we're going to have to find a new king. And so Saul gets the message either one way or another. We don't know if he was told directly, but he gets to understand that David will be his replacement, and he's not happy about that. But throughout that, David understands that regardless of his future, Saul is the Lord's anointed. And so remember that. So we went through that part. But then we went through David as king, and we saw the story earlier in this week of David and Bathsheba. And we saw that David was not considered perfect, besides the fact that, remember, he had lots of wives. So he had lots of wives, he had lots of children. And then we go into one of his sons comes to rebel against him, and he is defeated. And then finally, we have this scene right here where we have David's death. And what does he say? We can look at that. And, I'll bring up the Dewey Rayams and to see what he says. And he makes it clear that he says, I am going the way of all flesh. Take courage and show yourself to be a man. Show yourself a man. Now, he says, take courage and show yourself a man. The latest translations say, be strong and be a man. Now, these are interesting things to look at, because in our culture today, a lot of times when as someone is saying be a man, you're looking at someone to be like the classic Clint Eastwood character, not necessarily Clint Eastwood, because he's a totally different person than he portrayed in those old Westerns, which were great movies. We know that. And a lot of people will take that's the way to be a man, but we have to understand the whole history of David. And you can listen to Solomon say, well, we're not going to see it in the reading, obviously, because it's not in the Bible. But Solomon looks to David, and Solomon can look to David and says, well, what part of your life would you not repeat? And he could clearly say, well, that whole David and Bathsheba story, I would not repeat. And committing adultery and then to commit murder, to cover up. That's not the way a man should be. He can say that. And we also remember that he may have said, my relationship with Jonathan is a deep friendship that you should pursue. And so we're looking at different understandings. We don't know what he meant by that. But today, those words mean be a man, be tough, show yourself to be tough and be just like whatever. And that's not what David meant. And you've got to know what that means. Now, be strong and be a man is the latest translation where he's saying take courage and show yourself a man. In other words, to live strong as a man. And do understand that. So that's an interesting instruction that he gives. And then he says, keep charge of the Lord your God, to walk in his ways and observe his ceremonies and his precepts and judgments and testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses, that you may understand all that you may, and whatsoever you shall turn yourself. So let me see what that actually says. So that you may, so in other words, he's saying that you may succeed in everything you do. So how do you succeed in what you want to do? By keeping mindful of the Lord's precepts, all that the Lord calls us to do, and also that relationship with the Lord. So he's calling him to do that. And we're going to see how that, we actually probably won't see how that plays itself out until after Easter. We'll see parts of it right now, but I don't know. We're going to see how it all works out. But you see what he's saying. Now, how many times do you meet? I deal with this all the time. You meet the guy who's, well, I'm not into that religion thing. Is that what David told Solomon? That may have been what Solomon did later in his life, but is that what David told Solomon? No, not at all. He said, follow the Lord and his precepts. He would tell Solomon, if he was Catholic, he would tell Solomon, go to church every Sunday and go to confession regularly, because that's what the Lord wants you to do. And whereas a lot of guys are like, well, that religion is a woman's thing. No, it's not. And it's important to understand that. Do you know, if a guy lives his religion, then his children will live their religion too. But if he doesn't, his children won't. Yes, but the wife takes my children to mass every day or every week. Yeah, but they don't see you doing it. And so they will not go. One of the things I used to do when I was writing letters for immigration, and this is for immigration court, nothing wrong with this. And, I'd have people come up to me all the time and they'd say, could you write a letter for me? And one of the things I would say, I'd have to know them and stuff. And I would never say, I learned this in the military, I would never say anything that isn't true. So they might say I might say to them, do you go to church on Sunday? And they would say, yes, Father, I do. Oh, okay. Which mass do you go to? And of course, obviously, this would be for the Spanish-speaking mass, because obviously in the English-speaking mass, there weren't a lot of people who needed immigration letters. And they would say, oh, yes, I do. Which mass do you go to? I go to the Spanish-speaking mass. Oh, okay. Of course, all this would be in Spanish. Oh, okay. What time is it? It's in the morning. Yeah, what time in the morning? And I would really push them to give me an answer. Could you describe the priest who celebrates the Mass? And I'd be the one who celebrates the Mass. Yeah, was he blonde-haired? Yeah, Father, he's blonde-haired. Oh, okay. And then it would say, look, I'm going to tell you right now, I could write a letter for you right now, but it wouldn't be worth the paper it was printed on. So do yourself a favor, go find someone else to write the letter who can write the truth on the letter, because that's what I'm going to do. It's not going to be worth the paper it's printed on. Right? I could write something like, he says he goes to Mass every Sunday, whatever. And the judge is going to look at that and says, well, he says a lot of things. That doesn't mean anything. But if someone went to Mass every Sunday and I knew and they were part of the community, especially the active parts, I would literally say to them, I'll write a letter for you that you'll be qualified to be president of the United States. Which obviously they wouldn't, because they'd be immigrants. But you see what I'm saying? And that, because that's how important it is. And I would write that in the letter, That's very important. These are people who I would know, who would be active members of the parish, and I would make that very clear. So do you see that radical difference between the two? So always understand that there is this difference. This difference is real. And it's important for men to do exactly what David said. Now, what does he mean by be a man? Obviously, he doesn't mean you should also kill the messenger, by the way. The mailman who brings you bad news, not a good idea. Don't kill the mailman, obviously not. Or the mail person. Sorry, I got that wrong. No, obviously not. But David did. Remember, they didn't necessarily have mail the way David did. So David did. David did exactly that. So do you understand the difference? You understand how all this works out? That, yes, in fact, what you see is this is coming through where you see David calling Solomon to be rooted in the faith. And how do you translate that today? That you, as the man of the family, be rooted in the faith. And if you're not the man of the family, if you don't have a family yet, you're just growing, maybe you're in your teens, or maybe you're in college, or maybe you're a little older, be rooted in the faith. That's an important distinction, because we're going to see what happens when they don't do that. And he made it clear, because what is this? This is the truth. This is the Lord teaching what is our call to be the children of God. And how is it we're called to do that? By living the faith. But also that understands live the true faith, live as it we're called to do. Remember, David and Jonathan had a very intense relationship. If you want to have an understanding of what that would be, read the book by Elred of Rivaux, Spiritual Friendship. David and Jonathan had a real spiritual friendship. Understand that and know that you're called to that. So in this culture here in the United States, we have a culture that is turns men to be very superficial. They can't show emotion, and they can't show real friendship. And if they get, they show any friendship beyond the more superficial, then that's gay. No, that's not. That's not. And this is what, and people will say that's gay. And I'm making it clear, that's really important to understand it. Now, many people in the gay community will say David and Jonathan are models of gay friendship, of a gay relationship. No, they are models of an understanding of friendship that does not exist in our country today, and that needs to change. Because men need good friendships. And that's part of church teaching. Church teaching is to build what is unfortunately not translated well. In English, it's a disinterested friendship. In Latin, it's a gratuitous friendship, to build strong friendships. All men are called to do that. It's very important to build relationships, to live a good Catholic life, especially if you are called to celibacy. So do you understand that? And what you see here are these radical understandings of David teaching his son. Now, like I said, we're going to see whether or not his son lived it. But that understanding is not what we're living today, and that's a real issue. And I think part of it has to do with the fact we've lost the deep spirituality within the Catholic faith, and it's been more made superficial by other forms of spiritualities. And that's not what we're called to do. We're called to have deep friendships with God and deep friendships with others. So I want you to look at all that and understand that. And so what we're seeing is this is what he is sending to Solomon. And Solomon, of course, becomes known for many things, among which is the wisdom of Solomon. He is also known as Koholeth, as we see in the Bible as well. And we see that also in, that whole understanding of these deep teachings of the faith, that some of which, maybe all of it, I don't think all of it, some of which came from the deep wisdom of Solomon, but Solomon failed to follow what he was instructed to do, as we know. And there you have, maybe you could say, Solomon followed his genes. In any case, we're going to talk more about that on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. We're here every single Monday through Friday, and our program drops at midnight, and you can hear us, obviously, plenty of time. People listen at all different times. And so spread the word, subscribe, comment, like, and I really appreciate when you do all that. We'll be back right after this. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. Did you know that the Catholic Audio Media Podcast is available on various podcast platforms? You can find us, among others, on Podbean, which is our home platform. You can find it on Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeart, among others. Just look for Catholic Audio Media, all one word. On some platforms, such as Spotify, look for Catholic Audio Media, 3 words, and subscribe and listen to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out. Patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We're back, and I wanted to read to you. This is actually over at my Substack. You can find it. I'm going to end up reading it. It's my column over at Substack. You can find it at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. It's all basically one. There's no space in there. I'll put it that way. And this is what I wrote. Hebrews, Jesus came to free us from slavery to fear. Those who preach a fear of hell will suffer the fate they warn upon others. And this is something I wanted to bring out because it's something I deal with a lot where people live in terror of hell. So I'm going to talk about a passage I saw in the Bible. And after reading that passage, I said, well, wait a minute. We have to understand what that says for us today. I start off with a quote from Pope Leo XIV. Therefore, the proclamation of the gospel, catechesis, and the various forms of pastoral action must always be free from forms of constraint, rigidity, and moralism, so that it does not happen that they can arouse feelings of guilt and fear instead of inner liberation. Pope Leo XIV came from a recent speech he made to the Neo-Catechumenate in Rome. And so here is my column. I was engaging in my Bible study technique when I discovered a powerful verse. It comes from Hebrews 2:15, where we learn that Jesus freed us from the slavery, from the fear of death. Every preacher will tell you that no matter how many times he reads the Bible, there are always new understandings that come from a verse that one read previously a multitude of times. When I read these words, and here are the words, now, since the children share in blood and flesh, he likewise shared in them, that through death he might destroy the one who has the power of death, that is, the devil, and free those who through fear of death had been subject to slavery all their life. That's, again, it's Hebrews 2, verse 15. It comes to us from the New American Bible Revised Edition, which is copyright the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. I'll talk about more about that later. Jesus died to free us from the power of death, I continue, that caused us to be subject to slavery. However, I work with people who live in fear of ending up in hell all their lives. Did this passage just prove wrong the teaching that most Catholics and others will end up in hell and that virtually everyone is guilty of mortal sin at every moment of their lives? Did this passage neutralize the idea that your chances of going to hell are far, far greater than going to heaven? Isn't that a form of slavery to fear, to which many feel subject? I have to say yes. After 32 years of priestly ministry, I have to believe this teaching that virtually everyone will end up in hell unless they work hard to avoid it forces people to a slavery to fear that is clearly not the intention of the gospel. I believe the idea that virtually everyone will end up in hell is blasphemy against the salvific action of Jesus on the cross. However, reading this passage, I have to believe that making people slave to fear of hell is itself a grave evil. Do I believe in hell? I do believe in hell, but then again, as part of my work, I occasionally deal with extremely evil people. I believe hell is reserved for them. Let's put it another way. The Catholics seeking to live a good life, Catholic life, but find one or two areas of their lives they are inclined to sin, and maybe gravely are not in danger of ending up in hell because they sincerely care to repent and draw closer to Christ. Yet you might have a severely narcissistic personality who, without impunity, manipulates people all his or her life. He ruins lives every day and thinks nothing of it, and has no more interest in the things of God than he does in life on Mars. Such a person, cold, hard-hearted, and clearly destined to hell, makes those gravely sinful but otherwise faithful Catholics look like angels. Hell is clearly reserved for someone like the narcissist. It is not reserved for the somewhat sinful but repentant person who maintains a hope for heaven. However, there are many leaders in our church who traffic in the fear of hell, which fosters a slavery to that fear. I truly believe that besides the severe narcissist, those who preach that God's mercy is out of the reach of most Catholics are themselves the ones who will find themselves condemned to hell. They preach a slavery to fear, and Jesus came to free us from the slavery in all its forms. It is time to help leaders understand this focus on hell as a place most people go as evil, since those same people desire to be good Catholics. I firmly believe some of these influencers, particularly those who put forth the Latin Mass as the only blessed option, are themselves on their way to hell because they preach hell and division in their works. Jesus came to free us from this. I jokingly explain that I fully agree with one influencer who often tells people that even he has no assurance of his salvation. I explain I agree with him fully. I don't believe that he can be assured of his salvation. I say this because he preaches the massa damnata teaching, which is that the vast majority of people will be damned. Jesus died so that all could be saved. The church teaches that we must cooperate with grace and be agents of God's kingdom, especially to those who are most in need of experiencing it. However, or experiencing her is what I should have said. However, that whole message is lost to those who teach that we must work hard every day to get to heaven. Where does it say anywhere in the Bible that we must work hard to achieve salvation? It says instead our role is to love God and neighbor. The Bible literally says this work is not burdensome. That's 1 John 5:3. Obviously, we must be careful not to teach that all are by default saved. I say this because some people who disagree have not encountered truly evil people. However, neither must we teach people to despair of their salvation. Those who do lead people down that path may in fact be guilty of graver sin than many others. We have a mandate to help those who suffer, and we do not do that when we add more burdens to others, burdens that we do not carry, but we enslave them in fear. This is even worse when it is that same fear that Jesus came to eliminate from our lives. That act is truly evil. Just for the record, scripture texts in this work are taken from the New American Bible Revised Edition, copyright 2010, 1991, 1986, 1970, Confraternity of Christian Doctrine, Washington, D.C., and are used by permission of the copyright owner, all rights reserved. No part of the New American Bible may be reproduced in any form without permission in writing from the copyright owner. And so that's what I wrote. And I write that in a good understanding that this whole thing where people are literally living in terror of ending up in hell has to stop. It really does have to stop. And we shouldn't be teaching that. We really need to teach people to be focused on Christ. Now, you know how many times I say, keep away from these exorcists, these online exorcists. And they traffic in that fear, because what will you find from every one of these videos? They'll find you focusing you, getting you to focus on the devil. These are the sins that the devil wants you to commit. These are the sins that the devil does for people who want to be faithful. Well, where's your focus there? It's focused on the devil. You should never be focused on the devil. You should only be focused on Christ. So what you need is someone who'll say, this is how you can draw close to Christ. Not, this is the way that'll lead people that the devil wants you to be. Why? Because when you hear those headlines and you click on them, that exorcist makes a little dough on the side, because they make money. If they are monetized, they make money based on that video. Do you understand? On you watching that video. Now, if they aren't monetized, different story. But they make clicks, they make popularity, they make themselves whatever. You never click on anyone who leads you to focus on the devil. You'd be doing better by focusing on the amazing atheist. I don't even know if he's still around. Than you would on these, because they give you a false security by saying, oh, this is good religion. No, it isn't. It's got you focused on the devil. The amazing atheist, I haven't seen him in years. I don't know if he's still on. The amazing atheist, on the other hand, lets you know right from square one. He doesn't want you to be focused on Christ. That's what he does. So keep away from that. And these people who lead you to be terrified that, the devil's in your coffee pot and the devil's going to get you and all this other stuff, and you don't have a good chance of getting into heaven, that is evil. And I really believe it is. We're going to be back on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. We'll be right back. You can now leave a message for us, which we can air and discuss on this program. Just call 617-297-7452. That's 617-297-7452. 617-297-7452. Feel free to call, leave a comment, a question, or even feedback, and we may play it on the air. I can discuss your comment or question as well, so give that a try. 617-297-7452, 617-297-7452. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out, patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We're back. So tomorrow we're going to obviously look at the next reading in our line, and that's going to be from Sirach. Sirach is a fascinating reading. It comes to us from Sirach 47. And Sirach is a wisdom book, but it doesn't come from Solomon. And so we're going to look at that. And it's going to be talking about David, but it's not going to be David talking. How does that sound? So we're going to be looking at that tomorrow. And we're going to look at everything he had, that we're seeing from Sirach. Sirach is part of the Apocrypha. It's also known as the Septuagint. Catholics call it the Septuagint. Protestants call it the Apocrypha. The Apocrypha means books that are not canon, but we as Catholics believe it's canon. So Septuagint means 7 books that are from the Greek version of the Old Testament, which has all the books of the Old Testament and 7 more. So that's what's coming up tomorrow. In the meantime, pass the word and go check out the column I just read for you and all the rest of them at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. Leave a comment, whatever you want to do is subscribe, and it also tells you how to connect to our Patreon page, which you hear in the ad. In the meantime, also subscribe to this. Have yourself a blessed day, and we will talk to you tomorrow. The Catholic teaching in this podcast is reflected and presented as accurately as possible. The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Archdiocese of Boston or any other institution.